Thank you very much for getting us started. This is the last session of the Resource Forum, and we were discussing before that in a boxing card, they always save the best for last. This is the main event, is how I think we should profile ours. And it's the energy panel. Our topic is going to be tapping into BC's potential as an energy leader. What has struck me over the last couple of days is that maybe in the past, the energy sector, and I think maybe resources in general, have looked at ourselves more siloed, but the discussion over the last couple of days has really struck me, the convergence of the opportunities, the challenges, and the integration between the resource sectors is really immense. And last night there was a discussion with municipal leaders, and the municipal leaders are in a lot of ways really leading this and coming together from multiple different industries in different communities to try and carve a path forward for success. As we get started with this panel, I would like to, as many others have, recognize we are on the traditional territory of the Clay Dene, and also make the comment about over the lunch hour and the speaker, Crystal Smith. It was truly a master's class in leadership and authenticity, and it really gives me great hope for that type of leadership amongst the resource sector and the opportunities that we all share. And I think we're going to hear from some other leaders in the resource space that are bringing forward important projects. As we were talking about what we all wanted to contribute and some common areas of interest, it was clear that we have some serious challenges, that nothing is easy in Canada. We can take nothing for granted. But we also have to recognize that with support of leaders like Crystal Smith, of municipal sector, of business leaders, of elected leaders at the provincial level, at the federal level, we have some pretty big and impressive projects going forward. And what are the common threads? What are the important pieces that are making these projects successful? And on this panel, we can get some real insights of that. So I'm going to jump right into very brief introductions of our panelists to talk about their specific perspectives. And then I'll go through them all here with a quick introduction, and then we'll go down the line for some opening comments before we start the question and answer through Pigeonhole. So first, Mayor Laurie Ackerman of Fort St. John. The mayor is a long-serving public representative and a passionate advocate for the energy industry and the resource sector in general. And I'm sure most people know, but Mayor Ackerman was recognized as the Canadian Energy Person of the Year in 2019. And I think that speaks very highly for the efforts she's put in for a long period of time. Next, we'll hear from Chris Bloomer. He's president and CEO of the Canadian Energy Pipeline Association. Chris and CEPA represent the transmission pipeline companies all across Canada, and he has been at the forefront of the market access issue and continues to be a leader in that space. He's a strong advocate, a valued colleague for many of us in this room. Next, we'll hear from Michael Crothers. He's the president and country chair for Shell Canada Limited. Michael has had an extensive career across the company of Shell. He's seen the energy industry from almost every angle, I think. He's a thoughtful and respected leader, and obviously one of the most important projects for our industry, and I would say for Canada, is one that he's responsible for with the LNG facility. And our last speaker will be Chris O'Reilly, President and CEO of BC Hydro. Chris has been part of BC Hydro for many years, across many parts of the Crown Corporation and in many parts of the province. And again, one of the major projects which is happening in this province and of national importance is Site C. So look forward to hearing his comments about his corporation and some of the successes that they're having. So we will start off with Mayor Ackerman.
Sure. Well, thank you very much, Tim. I want to acknowledge and thank the Clay Dene for their warm welcome to their territory. And I also want to just acknowledge the Denes people that I come from. This is a shawl that I was presented with. I will be wearing this more than the mayor's chain of office. It's very warm. So I honestly think that Canada has lost its understanding of and therefore respect for our resource industries, all of our resource industries. I think that people have, they've forgotten where their food comes from. They have forgotten where their energy comes from. They don't understand the investment and the infrastructure behind the light switch and their thermostat and the plug-in. And so therefore, they just completely ignore the important conversations that we need to have. Fort St. John is in the heart of the Montney Basin, and we understand energy. We were Clean Energy BC's Community of the Year in 2017. And we were that community because we understand that energy is not just a commodity, it's a responsibility. And the work that is done by thousands of men and women across this nation should be acknowledged and appreciated on a daily basis. It gives us our quality of life, it gives us the society that we rely on, and the food that we eat. So when Fort St. John hears how others are confused by the conversation, we speak up and we brave that conversation. We are knowledgeable with our industries and the safety, the technology, the innovation. Our Canadian industries are absolute rock stars at what they do, and it's not acknowledged in an appropriate way. So we engage with the gray out there. There's always going to be those who will be absolutely opposed to absolutely everything, and you can't waste your energy on those. We're working very closely with some of our colleagues in a resource municipality coalition because municipalities really have no sphere of influence outside of their boundary. And so I want to acknowledge the Resource Municipality Coalition colleagues that are here today. And so that would be the District of Taylor, the District of Tumbler Ridge, and the District of Mackenzie, as well as the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality. And those mayors work with us and we engage across the way. I just want to speak for a moment on UNDRIP. The Resource Works hosted an event a couple weeks ago in Vancouver, and I told Premier Horgan upstairs here yesterday, UNDRIP is a framework that the local governments are going to be able to work out. It's not going to be a legislation that is going to be operated at a provincial level. It's those of us who are going to be working with our neighbors while we're sitting beside, two grandmas sitting beside each other watching our grandchildren play hockey together. So Chief Hunter and myself, we're going to be able to create communities that our grandchildren or our great-grandchildren are going to be able to enjoy. The City of Fort St. John took on a couple of initiatives. We contributed $85,000 over the last 2 budget years to ensure that our RCMP took the cold case files that they had and made sure they were investigatable. Within 6 months, we had a conviction on a sexual assault, a cold case sexual assault. It's the municipalities that are going to make the difference. Thank you.
Well, I want to thanks, Tim. I want to thank the sponsors for this conference. It's been an immense success, record attendance, and so on. Also want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Clé and appreciate their hospitality. In reflecting on this panel, I want to look at the themes of this conference. Strengthening BC's competitiveness. And that's the overall theme. This panel is, how do we be successful in the energy business? And the competitiveness question goes hand in hand with being successful in any business, but especially in the energy business. So we need to be competitive, and I think we are focusing in on that as in Canada, also in British Columbia. There's an immense resource. There's no question about that. And there's nothing but opportunity. But if you don't seize that opportunity, you have nothing. So we've got to understand how we can develop this resource, and I think we're moving forward. You know, LNG is so important. It puts BC, it puts Canada on the world map. You know, I was reflecting on the, you know, $40 billion project, and I was trying to get an analogy as to what that really means. That's 4 times the GDP of Denmark. That's, let's see, that's 100 F-35 fighter planes. And it's 10% of the Starship Enterprise. So if you want to build a spaceship, it's pretty expensive. But it puts it up there. It really is. And it's two Apollo missions. So this really is a moonshot, literally. It's almost 2 moonshots in its case. So it's an unbelievably big opportunity. We've come through 2019 as an industry overall. You know, we've been pushed and buffeted by markets, and we adjust to that as an industry. We've reduced our cost base. We are competitive, and that's really the core thing. And we have made a lot of strides in that. We've gone through tremendous regulatory changes, and I'll call them conversations. It's been very difficult, both at provincial and federal levels. And, you know, we've had legal challenges. We just came out in BC with the Supreme Court reference case. And, you know, the federal government really made it clear in the manner in which it rendered its decision that this is clearly a federal jurisdiction. And that's critically important to the conversations that we're having, that we understand where the jurisdictions are, and it brings clarity to the situation. You know, we had challenges politically and so on, but we are, as an industry, very, very adaptive. We you know, just tell us what we need to do in a way, and we will do it. So 2019 was tough. And it's almost like, with the change of the decade and the change of the year, there is optimism moving forward. And I have to say, like, I've worked in British Columbia. I've worked up north in places like Cassiar, Stewart, Dease Lake, Atlan, Germanson Landing, as a young geologist, mapping and looking for resources and so on. And I understand that the beauty and the awesomeness of the landscape and the responsibility that we have in resource development. So I have a strong relationship with BC and the resource industry. But on the positive side, we're moving forward on Trans Mountain. They're one of our members. We're moving forward on Coastal GasLink. Those are tremendous projects. And, you know, we also are moving on things like Keystone XL, Enbridge Line 3. Those are projects that have been locked in this debate and has come through 2019. And we see them moving forward. And we're very confident that those projects are going to get built. The other thing that's happening out there that I think is critical is that not only are the big pipelines and these big projects moving ahead, but we're seeing development in Alberta on the petrochemical side. And that's important because the NGLs that come out of the gas are going to Alberta petrochemical industry, and that is a huge investment opportunity. And those are going ahead with Interpipe and Pembina pipelines, and the expansion and development of TC Energy's NGTL system. So there is a tremendous amount of stuff happening. It's kind of like the spring breakup. Things, you kind of feel like things are kind of moving, and that's really great. So there's green shoots, but we still need to work through on these projects the clarity and certainty of getting the processes done. We also, as Your Worship. Mm-hmm. Your Worship said, we are leaders, and the big thing coming forward is this ESG concept, this environment, social, and governance, the lens that investors are going to look at this industry going forward. That's a really important thing, and we need to really emphasize that we are leaders in that in every respect, and that we need to talk more about that so that going forward, we can shape how that moves forward, but it's going to be a very big part of our lives in the energy sector and competitiveness. Talked about LNG. I think somebody said, what do we need? We need more LNG. I think it was Crystal Smith said that. You know, what's next? Well, more LNG. I think that's the future, and we should really focus on that. But we do have an energy future. We are, as an oil and gas industry, part of that industry. And we need to define, what we need to do is define where we fit in that. And, climate change, all the different issues that we have to deal with, we have a role in the future, and we're enablers of that role by the products we produce. You can't build solar panels and wind turbines without plastics and petrochemicals and so on. So we are part of the future, and we need to define that. Lastly, I think that's we should be the first MCF and the first barrel of oil consumed in any market in the world, because we produce it in environmentally, socially, and in a governance way in a very top, we're world class in that.
Good afternoon. First, again, thanks to the Collecte Tenay people for hosting us in our traditional territory today. Great to be back in Prince George. I think the last time I was here was with my wife and kids in a tent. So it's nice to be in a hotel room last night. And congratulations on what looks to be a really dynamic conference that's just going from strength to strength as years go by. It's an exciting new decade. And this is a decade that will see the first BC gas exported as LNG, as part of the LNG Canada project that Shell leads along with our JV partners, Petronas, PetroChina, Mitsubishi, and KOGAS. I want to talk just a bit about the ingredients that we see so far as success for us and what we'll have to keep doing. And it's a project really founded on three things: competitiveness, relationships, and environmental excellence. And these three things will be central to BC's long-term success. The competitiveness elements you've heard before: short transit distance to Asian markets, a very abundant low-cost gas, getting into surging demand to help people deal with their issues with air quality, with energy poverty, and getting off of coal, and a sound fiscal framework that was convincing for us to invest here in BC. The economic fundamentals will remain in the decade ahead. I've got real confidence of the BC upstream that Shell's a big part of here in the area where Mayor Ackerman works, around Fort St. John with our Groundbirch operations. We'll continue to innovate to improve not only cost performance, but also environmental performance. Demand for gas will continue to grow. I mentioned the need to displace coal, but also to complement renewables, to deal with the intermittency of wind and solar as they become a more predominant part of the energy mix, and also to really support a growing and emerging middle class that wants access to energy for their quality of life. A key challenge I leave in this area of competitiveness, though, is how can we simplify the regulatory frameworks, make them clear and easier to navigate so that we can really unleash even more investment. Secondly, on relationships. LNG Canada set out to build relationships before we commenced the project. And in particular, it was only through a foundation of trust and partnership with First Nations, that you heard earlier today expressed by Chief Crystal Smith and others, that we were able to progress. And this focus on delivering shared value and economic benefits is amazing. I mean, the numbers are staggering. 10,000 jobs here in BC for the LNG Canada liquefaction plant construction, 2,500 jobs with Coastal GasLink as we connect Dawson Creek to Kitimat with the Coastal GasLink pipeline. It includes already $1 billion of LNG Canada contract work for local work here in BC, and of that, $600 million is related to Kitimat and First Nations businesses. To top that off, Coastal GasLink has also committed $600 million of work already to Indigenous businesses. Staggering, but it's key for us to deliver our commitments to all of our partners across the whole province. This is making an incredible difference in people's lives, and you saw earlier over lunch, those of you that were here, the personal stories. And this is what really gets you when you see the impact this is making on individual people and their families. It's absolutely transformational. And it's difficult in all parts of BC. It's almost like two provinces in the Lower Mainland and the rest of the province, and challenging with forestry and challenging with other changes in the economy. So this provides great chance for people to work and and have that integrity of work. We're really pleased to see the leadership of the BC government on UNDRIP, which Shell strongly supports. I think if companies, First Nations, communities, and governments can work together to build a common vision that balances economic development with continued access to energy while ensuring that we protect the environment and that we reduce emissions, we have a winning combination. It sounds idealistic, and perhaps it is, but I think this collaboration combined with pragmatism is something that if we keep focused on the greater good, we can really deliver. It's here in Canada and here in BC, I believe it's possible. And finally, regarding the environment, BC natural gas is among the cleanest in the world. With global demand expected to exceed 150 trillion cubic feet annually by about 2030, which is a staggering number, the quality of that gas matters, and the way it's produced matters. We have customers starting to demand from us lower carbon intensity fuels, lower carbon intensity LNG cargoes. We sold our first two carbon neutral LNG cargoes in August last year. BC has a unique competitive advantage in this space. BC has over 500 TCF in the Montney here. It's enough to keep Canada going for 100 years and the whole world for 4 or 5 years only just by itself. It's an amazing resource. And it is the resource, as Chris was saying, that should be the first and last used on the planet. Shell's deeply committed to environmental excellence. We've had voluntary methane controls at our site in Groundbirch in northeastern BC for 6 years. We have, since 2018, electric well pads, no pneumatic actuators on our well pads, so no methane venting, 91% reduction in emissions. We've electrified our gas plants in 2016. Some of our peers have done the same. We're a partner with many of our peer companies in the Natural Gas Innovation Fund. It is helping clean tech startups like some of the ones you saw outside, like Saltworks, get going in Canada and provide solutions. As a sector, we need to do more. The Clean BC plan is something that we should really embrace as companies. We can continue to drive down our emissions and look for ways to improve our environmental performance. Not only that, but look at how we can deploy technology to support Clean BC the way Shell's doing. We're investing heavily in renewables, renewable power, renewable fuels, and we have opportunities here to help Canadians with lower carbon solutions, be that EV charging, be that hydrogen as in Vancouver, or other biofuels and other solutions. We're committed to that. So one can imagine a future for BC where we're a world leader, we're exporting this low carbon intensity gas as LNG to help the world meet its climate change issues, while at home, we're innovating and finding new ways to drive our emissions down. Shell's really proud to be part of that vision for the province of British Columbia. And through those three elements of competitiveness, relationships, and environmental excellence, we will succeed. Thank you. Chris?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'd also like to acknowledge that we're on the traditional territory of the Lheidli today, and I really appreciate the welcome we've all received. I always enjoy coming to Prince George. I spent some time here early in my career with BC Hydro. I also spent some time planting trees as a student, and we used to stay at the downtown motel just a couple blocks over, and it looks the same, except it used to be a travel lodge. It's not now. I want to talk about a few projects we've got underway, 3 big ones and a really small one that I think are indicative of the work we're doing to support the energy industry in BC, the broader growth in the economy, while also reducing emissions through clean energy. And I think these projects are also indicative of the challenges that we face building projects in an environment where societal expectations around safety, around environmental performance, and around relationships with First Nations and communities are growing. I'll talk first about the Peace Region Electricity Supply Project, or PRES as we call it. And that's a project to increase the capacity to reach the gas fields in the South Peace. So and that's primarily to support the gas production there. We're building 2 lines, 58 kilometers, 230,000 volts, connecting a substation at Site C near Fort St. John down to near Dawson Creek. It's a really important project to help the province meet its Clean BC targets as we have a growing industry in that part of the province, and we really want those producers to use our product instead of self-generating with gas. It was a project that costs about almost $300 million. We were really pleased to receive a grant from the federal government for $83 million to help the economics, and they did that recognizing the central importance of that line. We started consulting and engaging with communities and First Nations very early, including on the route, and we were able to site the route alongside existing infrastructure, roads and pipelines, and that was really important to garnering support for the project. It started in July 2018 through the clearing. We're building the line now, and it will be in service by fall of 2021. We also have a part in the LNG Canada project. We're building an important link to provide electricity for that project. They're using electricity for the auxiliary power, and it will be among our largest single sites in the province. The involves an expansion of the substation, 2 lines for redundancy into the LNG Canada site. We've been working for years partnering with LNG Canada on the logistics and the planning and the configuration, and it's been a really beneficial relationship. I should say the cost of that is being paid jointly by BC Hydro and LNG Canada according to the tariffs we have in place. So LNG Canada are paying the full freight on the electricity and the capital there. So really important project, and we're really pleased to be part of it with Shell and its partners. The third project, which you've heard lots about, would be the Site C project. So one of the largest projects underway in the province today. It will be the 3rd dam on the Peace River. We're now in our 4th year of construction. It has been a very challenging project. It's a large project, but we've had some really good progress on construction. Last year in particular, we had an excellent year. We placed a record-setting amount of roller compacted concrete, completing 2 of the 3 buttresses that are required to support the dam and the structures. This year, the focus is on the diversion, so we're going to, in September, divert the river through these 2 large tunnels, and that will allow us to build the dam itself in the main channel of the river, and we've finished excavating the tunnels. We're lining them with concrete and building inlet and outlet towers at each end. We count down the days to diversion. It's 214 days from today, a really critical milestone on the project, and we're all on track for that. The project has been an important economic driver here in the north. You heard about its impact yesterday on the broader GDP. There's been 700 businesses have supported the project directly as a contractor or a subcontractor or a supplier of goods and services. We are I'm also very aware that a project like that, the benefits are spread across our society and the province, but the impacts are felt very keenly in the valley and on the community. And we do respect that there are different views on the project. We've been working very hard over the years to build support for the project. We have a number of agreements with First Nations that provide financial benefits and procurement and training and employment and the like, and really, really proud of the benefits there. And we continue to seek broader support for the project. Once it's complete, we see it as an example. It can be a global example of building a project to a very, very large project to a very high standard of safety, environmental performance, and social commitments. It is a big part of our plan to electrify the province and to meet the Clean BC targets, and we have a 98% clean electricity advantage here in BC, something we're very proud of, and we want to continue to grow the use of electricity for helping us get around, heating our homes, and supplying electricity, and we're doing all we can to remove the barriers that get in the way of that. I think that turns me now to the one small project I just want to highlight that has some local benefits. We've been building out a network of fast DC charging stations around the province. We've got 80 of them at 70 sites, and we've been doing that in partnership with the federal government. They've provided a lot of the money, and we build the stations and look after them. So we're building the network on transportation corridors to give people confidence that they can take their EVs on the road. So we're just completed stations in Williams Lake, Quesnel, and Hickson, and we will have the Prince George station in place in the spring. So it's over at the Great Canadian Superstore if you're looking. And what we'll continue to build out the network through the north so people can travel all over the province. And it's just one example of the things we're doing to break down barriers for the use of electricity and the reduction of emissions in our economy.
Excellent. Perfect. Well, I think this sets us up well for a very good discussion. I see that we've already populated the questions, and those have just come up for us. So maybe as we read through these and get prepared, something, Michael, that I was going to follow on maybe some of our dinner conversation was, you're moving this project forward. You talked about kind of the three pieces, and relationships was one of the most important. Something that you shared with me at lunch was, as you were bringing your board through this decision, and it was one of the biggest decisions that Shell has made in a long time on an investment front, a crucial part of that was your board wanted to come and sit down with the people here on the ground, the leaders that were going to be so important through the building of it and the operation of it. Could you maybe reflect a little bit on what that meant to your board and what they wanted or needed to hear to get to the positive outcome that you got to?
Yeah, sure. I mean, these are such long life projects. It's a 40-year commitment. And if you don't have a sense that the communities you're going to be operating in really want this project and you can work with them in partnership, then it's something we really shouldn't start. We want to be part of projects that are creating mutual value. So the board really was interested in meeting some of the Indigenous leaders, including Chief Crystal Smith, meeting the mayor of Kitimat, Mayor Gramuth, and so on, hearing firsthand from them. It's one thing for me to be spinning how good it is and we should just put the money down on the table and get on with this project. As a Canadian, I've kind of a self-interest in that, but they really were keen on that. And it was so powerful to hear the testimony coming from those local leaders about how important this project was for the long-term benefit of the community, and that they were so pleased with the standard that had been set for the environment. It's something that they could really get behind. And it comes down to trust. And if the trust is there and it's genuine, then so many things can flow from that. And it's not without opposition. People understand that, but have to understand where that's coming from. Is there a way to manage that? Is the community largely still behind it? How can we be sensitive to the concerns of those that don't support these projects? And just take that whole picture into account. So, very thoughtful, as much time spent on those aspects of the project as we spent on the economics of it. So, yeah, I was really pleased with that level of engagement to really make sure we were doing the right thing for Canada, and we certainly are, I think, and for BC especially.
Absolutely. Looking at the questions that come up in front of us, the first one we'll go to, it talks about how, there is an organized, well-funded opposition in many cases to some of our projects. I know we sometimes think it's just about oil and gas, but in some of the discussion we were having just before I came on stage, you as mayor hear about the dam on occasion from people
Yes.
that aren't big supporters of it. So it does cut across. Obviously, pipelines have been an area of discussion for a period of time, and it was oil pipelines for a while, and now we see gas. Chris, any comments you'd have? The question wanted to know about working across industry lines. So it's not just about pipelines. It's not just about hydroelectric. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a super important aspect of it because pipelines, as you know, for I don't know, maybe a decade now, have been kind of the nexus of a lot of activism for many reasons. And the question really is that how do we work together to counter that narrative and so on? And that's a very serious thing that we need to do going forward. And when I said it earlier, defining our role as an industry in the future is really key. And that goes for all things like mining and forestry and oil and gas. And being faced with this ESG component, how do we define ourselves in the future? And we need to work together as resource industries to define that future. I really think it's critically important. And we're seeing more collaboration than we ever have across sectors and across industries around this issue, because we have to counter the narrative. We have to debunk. We have to somebody said earlier today, we have to kind of myth busters on this stuff. We all have to be engaged in this and be consistent.
Mayor Ackerman, last night at the municipal leaders event, the group was recognized that you're a part of, where mayors from multiple jurisdictions with multiple resources are coming together to support each other. And there was a hesitancy. Some of them admitted to come to that table, but ultimately are very glad they're there.
Sure. Municipalities don't have the ability to do everything. And so when we work together and we link arms together and we can look at all of the impacts to our residents, our industries, our companies, then we can do a lot more. We can support the industry in a very robust way. And if I can't make it to a meeting, I know that my colleagues have my back when they're able to be there. It's interesting when we have some of our colleagues in the South that do not understand the industry. On Monday evening, our council put forward a resolution supporting the First Nations Alliance for LNG, telling the City of Victoria to quit meddling with the Wet'suwet'en. And you heard Crystal talk earlier about the only way to resolve this is the Wet'suwet'en people need to resolve it themselves. So I'm actually working with the Alberta Union of Municipal Association, Mayor Morishita from Brooks, to try and create a resource municipality coalition across Canada. So I don't care if you're a cod fisherman in Newfoundland or if you're a grain producer in Saskatchewan. The reality is this is our country, our nation, and it's our God-given right to argue and disagree, but we have to look after our people first. And those who are coming to Canada with different views have to be just set aside respectfully, and let's have a conversation.
The next one up in front of us is talking about ESG. That's something that's of increasing importance, I'd say specifically for the oil and gas industry, as the question denotes. I think though we're playing a leadership role in this today, I think that all businesses are going to have an increased expectation. I think Canada can and should play a leadership role in this regard. Michael, your company would be one that I would say is well out in front of even where most Canadian companies are. Would you speak to some of the things that you guys are doing on the ESG front?
Oh, sure. I mean, it goes back into the 80s for our company, actually, where our chairman at the time, Mark Moody Stewart, started focusing on climate change and carbon intensity of our resource extraction and committing to Kyoto and committing to managing our emissions, reducing flaring and so on. Created a social performance committee inside Shell in the 90s, which has outside representation from environmental organizations to do external audits, independent reviews, challenge us. It's become even more prevalent in the last 5 or 10 years with our investors, really insisting on seeing how Shell's making a very marked progress that's transparent, that's accountable to our shareholders and to the public, that's reported very openly. You can see us taking a real leading role in that in terms of environmental performance, but also transparency on donations and engagements with government, our financial transparency commitments, reporting that we do. It's really permeating the whole company. And yeah, I'm proud to work for a company that has a set of values like that. We take our ethics and compliance really seriously. But the standard that society expects of us is continuing to rise, and we have to be able to adapt to that, and we're up for it. One of the things that's just been added to our our remuneration in terms of a requirement is that we are showing tangible reduction year on year in the carbon intensity of our company. We have a commitment that by 2050 we'll have cut the carbon intensity of our products by half. Let that settle for a second. That is an absolutely audacious goal because 80% of the emissions that come from our product comes from consumers using it. And so to be able to cut that whole portfolio of emissions by half and start to get measured and paying your senior executives based on that is a serious commitment to meeting the challenges of global climate change. And it's real, it's tangible. I need to find ways within my business year on year to deliver that, as do all Shell executives, while we broadly transform the company. Starting in 2016, we started investing in this new energies division. And it's thanks to capacity of a company like Shell, we can invest $1 or plus billion a year in transforming ourselves from reliance on oil and gas as part of our portfolio over time to being a real powerhouse on renewable energy and renewable fuels. And I'm proud to be part of that in Canada. We're starting in some small ways, but BC is a fantastic place for that because Clean BC has all these opportunities that fit so nicely with where Shell's going as a company.
Chris, when we think ESG, we often think public markets and the expectation. You're running your shareholders are the people of British Columbia, and though ESG may not be thought of with a public Crown corporation, reporting, the expectations of your shareholders are second to none. And any comments on kind of has that changed over time and how you guys approach that?
Yeah, I would say two things. There's a very high expectation on BC Hydro in terms of performance in this area, and it's not about one person on a board or a team. I would say the value is pervasive among the directors on our board, and they're always pushing for more. And just more discussion and wanting to understand alternatives and options and how could we do it differently and better. The other thing I would say is we in Canada have very high standards when it comes to environmental and social requirements. So if you take a project through a Canadian or provincial environmental assessment process and the conditions that come of that are very meaningful and high. And it's something I think we can all be proud of, and it's one of the things that makes Canada stand out in the world, and I think that gets lost sometimes in the discussion.
Absolutely. We got one question before we do a final round, just 2 minutes for a wrap-up for each person, but the next question up is about misunderstandings and how those can be exploited to limit our ability to develop our resources, be that hydro or oil or gas. And I think there's an obligation on all resource industries to be talking about meeting those misunderstandings head on. Chris, pipelines is something that I have definitely seen that evolve, that 5 years ago, pipeline safety was a nightly discussion. Today, I sense it's less about pipeline safety, that you guys have addressed very publicly those concerns, as you should, but any comments on how that's evolving?
That's a really good point, Tim, and thanks for raising that, because when I first came into this role 5 years ago, I would spend half my time in a meeting with the government or with communities or people. Had to explain, well, why are pipelines safe? Because the perception was that it's just going to be all over the place in a sense. But that through a program of transparency, communication, education, and the government, actually federal government, is saying that pipelines are safe. And we do that through our performance, and that's bedrock for us. We don't get to talk about the other things. We don't get to talk about building pipelines. We don't get to talk about engaging in policy and regulatory policy and trying to create certainty and clarity in those processes unless we are safe. So that has changed dramatically. That's a really big deal. But as an industry, we have to keep doing that. We have to be transparent. We have to engage. We have to educate. And the community aspect is getting even more important. We have to engage and communicate with all stakeholders. So And that's evolved too. And as an industry, as a pipeline industry, we are committed to advancing that.
No, good point. I think, so much of the work we do is increasingly technical, and they aren't necessarily easy to explain, but there's an obligation on us to continually answer the questions. And I think it's also, as you identify, when governments who have the authority and the responsibility to regulate are clear and concise about safety of pipelines.
Yeah.
I think that helps people that don't have the time or the ability to understand those technical pieces to get on board.
That was critically important.
Absolutely. A couple minutes to wrap up, so maybe I'll start here beside me. Mary, any thoughts from the discussion?
Yeah, I think that, moving forward, we heard Crystal today talk about her story. And I think that it's so important that we have some really personal stories and to share that. Our First Nations in Northeast BC have, different struggles with resource industries and the impact on the land. And so we're engaging with them so we can understand things a lot better. As we talk to others who have differing ideas, I hear my mother's voice in my ear saying, "Sweetie, take the high road. There's less traffic up there." And it's about constantly having the facts at your fingertips so that you can share those facts in a reasonable way and you don't get into mudslinging. I think a couple of important things happened over the last few years. There was a change in government federally, and there was a change in government here in British Columbia. And both of those changes, they were in opposition before, and opposition, anti, all of these projects, and now they're supporting them. So when you take a look at how our federal government and our provincial government are supporting these projects, it's very clear in my mind that if you stick with the facts and you take the high road, there will be some understanding. I think people have to acknowledge that we also have world-class regulators. I've had people sitting in my office from around the world, from other countries, who have come to me and said, "We have a lot of NIMBYism, and how is it you can manage to accept this industry?" And it's because I know that our Oil and Gas Commission in British Columbia and our Canadian energy regulator, they know what they're doing. And we have to have faith and trust in our institutions. And as society changes, technology changes, regulations will change. But I think that as Canadians, we do things extremely well. We should be thanking each other for what we're doing, and we need to support each other as we move forward in the future.
Here. Chris?
Oh, thanks. My takeaways from this conversation and from this event is that we are moving forward. And I'm very, very optimistic. I think we're learning, and it's evolving how to collaborate and cooperate and communicate in different ways. And we really are, as an industry and as a society, evolving. And I think we're moving to a place where we will get this clarity and certainty, both in terms of our relationships, right down to the community level and individual level, because we're all connected. And we have to be able to do our business and be able to connect in that way so that society really sees the benefits. And it's not like, where does the electricity come from, and flip the switch, but these projects provide livelihoods and a quality of life for generations to come. And I think that's really, really where it's at. So we're learning, and we're growing, and we're changing. And I'm very optimistic about the future. And the point is that that Mayor made, Your Worship, sorry, but about the government, really saying that these projects are going ahead. They are legitimate, and that's a big step. It's just like when the federal government said pipelines are safe. That makes a big difference. We need those messagings, and we need to help that, because we have a tremendous future in front of us, and we should always be optimistic about that.
Thank you.
I guess as a Canadian reflecting on the energy system in Canada, it's something that should unite us rather than divide us. And unfortunately, it has been a divisive topic in the last few years. But we need to rise above that. We need to grasp the opportunity this provides for Canadians. But part of the obligation as an energy company is to be credible. And to be credible, I think, means to show that you're doing things in a way that's truly collaborative, that truly listens, that truly engages communities, but that also is part of the solution. So, we have to be doing our part in the environment, and part of the engagement dialogue has to be much more humble and about what we're actually doing and less about how important we are. And I think if you engage Canadians with that kind of a message, and they see us investing in nature and conservation and energy reduction and all these things that we're doing to reduce the carbon intensity of our world while we enable this unique resource to get to the world that needs it, I think that's a story Canadians can buy into. So we need to continue to commit. All of us can do this. All of us can tell that story. All of us can be mobilized to share that and talk to our fellow Canadians about the importance of this and how it can have such a big impact on the world. So, thanks.
Absolutely. Chris?
I think what I would say is that I think the experience of the last few years reminds us that big projects are really hard, and you have to do the work, you have to put the effort in, the planning, the engagement, the building, the partnerships, but the fact that we've got a number of major projects moving forward says that can be done, and we should be proud of that. I think a forum like this, which I think I have to say is really unusual in this province. First of all, it's up here in the north. It's not in Vancouver. It's bringing together many different groups, project proponents, communities, leaders, First Nations. Lots of different people are here, and I think a forum like this can help share those stories, help guide, help light the pathway for projects and allow people to come together and learn from one another. So it's just been a great experience, and that's why I come back every year, because I think it's a really great place to be. So thank you very much.
Right.